Hello, good afternoon. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this afternoon. Thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon to commemorate Cesar Chavez's 85th birthday by honoring and recognizing 10 champions of change, people who are working every day on issues including improving the lives of farm workers, providing quality education for our youth, and ensuring that immigrants have the services they need to become fully contributing members of our community. My name is America Ferreira, and it is my honor to serve as your Mistress of Ceremonies today. Growing up the child of immigrant parents in California, I have always felt represented and inspired by Cesar Chavez's legacy. It is my deepest privilege to have been asked recently to portray the role of Helen Chavez, Cesar's wife and partner in the movement. In an upcoming biopic of Cesar's life called Chavez, I hope to do the great woman justice. Because of this, I've had the pleasure of learning about the critical role women played on every level of this movement, particularly the commitment that Helen displayed on behalf of the families whose lives hanged in the balance. And it gives me great pleasure and no shock whatsoever to see that 8 of our 10 champions today are women. I would just like to personally take a moment to say thank you to each and every one of our panelists here today for doing the endless and hard work of not only being a voice for those who too often go unheard, but for empowering them to find the strength and to stand up and be heard themselves. Now it is my honor to be introducing our next speaker. Cesar Luis Chavez was born in Delano, California in 1980. He is the son of Anthony and Anna Chavez and grandson of United Farm Workers founder Cesar Chavez. He grew up at the UFW's La Paz, Keene, California headquarters, where he began his work with the farm worker movement. At the age of 5, he sat beside his grandmother, Helen, and helped stuff envelopes for the Farm Workers Credit Union. From a young age, Cesar accompanied his grandfather on picket lines and demonstrations in the Central Valley, as well as major California cities. He also enjoyed personal time with his grandfather on hikes in the mountains surrounding La Paz. Please join me in welcoming Cesar Luis Chavez to the stage.
Thank you. On behalf of my grandmother, Helen, the entire Chavez family, and the many farm workers who shared the suffering with my grandfather, I would like to thank you all for being here today to honor my grandfather's life and work and honoring our 10 wonderful champions of change. I would also like to recognize a couple members of the family that are in the audience today, my cousins, Christine and Oscar, who work for the USDA. I would also like to thank President Obama, Secretary Salazar Solis and Vilsack, and the entire Obama administration for their leadership and continued efforts in honoring my grandfather's work. Our family has accepted these honors, just like my grandfather accepted all of his honors when he was alive, as a tribute to the hard-working farm workers that have and continue to put food on our tables. Growing up, my grandfather shared stories with us from his early days of organizing. One that I remember most was one of his first house meetings, which took place in the living room of a worker's home in California's Tulare County. 4 farm worker couples were present. Cesar softly asked if they ever heard of the Farm Workers Association, the new movement he was building in the valley. He knew no one had because Cesar just decided on the name that day, but heads leaned forward. He said through this movement, farm workers could free themselves from the injustices they faced on the job and in the community. There was no ready-made plan, he said. That was why he was meeting with them to put one together based on what they, the workers, wanted. Cesar asked for questions. Workers raised many issues and injustices, asking if the new Farm Workers Association could help. He answered and then explained that when the workers had their own association, many of these injustices would be remedied. But all that, Cesar said, will only come after a long time and all the hard work and suffering that goes into organizing and struggling with the growers for our union contracts. Then one man spoke up. The association is a great idea, Mr. Chavez. The only trouble is, it just won't work. The growers are too powerful. Most of others nodded their heads in agreement, but over in the corner, Cesar spotted a woman and her husband who were whispering. He gently explained that the mistake farmworkers make is believing the growers are more powerful than they really are. It's true, they're powerful, all right, but if the movement fails, it won't be because the growers are powerful enough to stop it, but because the workers refuse to use their power to make it go. Probably there is no one in this room who is willing to help, Cesar said. His eyes traveled from one worker to another. But I know that somewhere in Tulare County, I will find one who is willing. That's all I need, just one, because that one will take me to others who feel the same, and they will make a workers' committee for this country. And when we have such committees in each important county in the state, we will call them together in Fresno and map the future course of La Causa. Afterwards, the workers came up to shake his hand. Some grabbed a few survey cards as they left, until only the whispering woman and her husband remained. I want a few words, the man began, his eyes shining. But I like what you said tonight, Mr. Chavez, and there are some on my field crew that I think would like it too. If I got them together over at my house one night soon, do you think you could take the time to come and tell them about it? Smiling, Cesar held the man's shoulder and said, "Hay más tiempo que vida." It's an old Mexican dicho or saying meaning there is more time than life. And that was how it started. Cesar searching for those few people that were willing to stand with him for what they believed in. And those people searching for more people to all pull together in support for a new association. That September, 200 farm workers and from dozens of small valley towns met in Fresno to found the National Farm Workers Association, which later became the United Farm Workers of America. It was those workers that Cesar targeted to help accomplish his goals, workers that stood out above everyone else and helped him create history. Fast forward 50 years later, and today we are honoring 10 individuals that fit the exact description of what Cesar was looking for back then. Champions of change that are dedicated. Champions that are willing to give their lives to help others. Champions that are accepting of all people. Champions of change that have stepped forward and are helping our nation in living by Cesar's core values. Starting 50 years ago, the farm workers started and still end every meeting with the farm worker clap. I can't think of a better place than the White House in Washington, D.C. for everyone to join me in the farm worker hand clap as we salute today's Cesar Chavez's Champions of Change. Thank you.
Thank you, Cesar. As we just heard, Cesar Chavez was an ordinary person who was able to accomplish extraordinary things on behalf of farm workers and Latinos, just like the Chavez Champions of Change we are recognizing today. So without further delay, let's introduce the stars of this program, this year's Cesar Chavez Champions of Change. On our first panel, we have Elvira Diaz, was born in Mexico City, immigrated to the United States in 1986 and became a U.S. citizen in 1992. Elvira has been working at the Progressive League Alliance of Nevada in Reno since 2010, organizing healthcare events and advocating on behalf of immigration reform and LGBT communities. Elvira also has a Spanish TV show, El Pan de Cada Día, which means the daily bread, and has been a radio personality in 2 local radio stations in the area, helping to educate Latinos about their rights and responsibilities. Rogelio Lona is a farm worker, activist, community organizer, and a leader in Gilroy, California. He has worked in the fields of California for more than 47 years, and for 32 of those years, he has been a member of the United Farm Workers. Just like his mentor, Cesar Chavez, Lona experienced and lived the struggles of the early farm worker movement. And although the struggle is not over, Lona has also been able to celebrate some of the victories that farm workers have been able to accomplish to improve the working conditions of the men and women who labor in the fields. Bernardo Wong, better known as Bernie, is a founder and the president of the Chinese American Service League in Chicago, Illinois. Under Bernie's leadership, CASL has grown from a one-person shop in 1979 with an annual budget of $30,000 to a thriving organization with an annual budget of $12 million. Born and raised in Hong Kong, Bernie's early life experiences set the stage for her mission approach to serving others with dignity and respect. Rob Williams is the director of the Migrant Farm Worker Justice Project, established by Florida Legal Services in 1996 and funded by the Florida Bar Foundation. The project's mission is to provide access to justice for the more than 150,000 farm workers who live and work in Florida. For more than a decade, he has worked to enact the Ag Jobs immigration reform legislation, which would benefit the 1 million undocumented workers and their families who harvest America's food. And now, to introduce our moderator for the first panel, Viviana Hurtado, founding editor of the cutting-edge blog, The Wise Latina Club, which focuses on engaging Latinas in political and civic life. Recognized as a bold, independent, and emerging voice, Viviana is a political contributor on NPR's Tell Me More with Michelle Martin, CNN en Español, and Univision's Al Punto con Jorge Ramos. Born in San Francisco, California, to immigrants from Colombia, Viviana is the proud daughter of a retired machinist and high school secretary. And she is also, like me, a lover of golden retrievers, as it said on her Twitter account. Please welcome Viviana Hurtado and our first panelists.
Thank you, America. I'd like you to know that I practiced that in front of the bathroom mirror last night. Thank you, America. And I also just wanted to introduce one more panelist, Mary Jo Dudley, who is at my left. Mary Jo Dudley is a faculty member in the Department of Development Sociology at Cornell University and is the director of the Cornell Farmer Worker Program. As director, yep, give it up for Mary. As director of the program, her work focuses on improving the living and working conditions of farm workers and their families by educating farm workers and their employers on health, safety, cultural, and immigration issues, and by conducting research that examines the contributions of farm workers to the economic and social fabric of New York State. She is a founding member of the Tompkins County Immigrants' Rights Coalition and a member of the New York State Governor's Anti-Human Trafficking Task Force. Welcome, Mary. And I just also want to say that only in America, as America said, is it possible for the daughter of immigrants from Colombia, a retired machinist and a retired public school secretary, to be here moderating a panel at the White House. Just incredible. But we are here to honor the legacy of Cesar Chavez. He once said that a leader makes ordinary people do extraordinary things, and that's exactly what we're here celebrating. So my first question is going to be for each of our panelists, if you can tell us what you think is the legacy of Cesar Chavez and how your work in the community promotes it and furthers it. Let's start with Bernie.
Thank you so much, Viviana. Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, we're just very delighted to be here. First of all, I want to thank President Obama and his plan in developing this Winning the Future initiative, which includes this Champion for Change award. I'm truly, truly honored to be receiving this award with such distinguished colleagues, especially in the legacy and spirit of Cesar Chavez. His life and memory is a constant reminder to me, and it should be to everyone, that if you have passion, that you can accomplish anything, and you can be a champion of change. And I'm very humble because I see a lot of other people who worked, just as hard as I do out there, and they have accomplished a lot. And so there's really a lot of champion of change outside. They're not here today, so I want to salute all of them too. Okay. I want to say that immigrant experience, has many parallel, regardless of what ethnicity you have. We in Chicago work with a lot of other ethnic groups, other immigrant groups, and so not unlike the Latino immigrant experience, many Asian American also faces a lot of challenges. And we go through poverty and discrimination and language barriers. The perception is that the Asians do not have that problem, and I'm here to say, yes, we do. We have a problem just like any other immigrant population. I make it my life work to fight for the rights of the Asian American, and because I believe passionately that the dignity and respect and fair working condition, it needs to be for everybody. So when I talk about my life's work, I can't not forget, thinking about my mother. My mother is my role model, who have instilled in me many of the same core values that Cesar Chavez had, shared with everybody. My mother just, passed away at 95 some years ago. And I have to say that, she's a true social worker who was not trained to be a social worker. She was a 3-time failure to try to be a nun. And she didn't pass. And so her mother superior said that, you have a different mission in life. You should procreate, and your children will do other things. So that's what I'm trying to follow that. So arriving in this country when I was 18, and now I'm a senior citizen, I came with $80 in my pocket, and knowing not everyone here. First time flew out from Hong Kong, never been on a plane. So experiencing, loneliness and hunger, I really feel the firsthand, the experience that many of the immigrants feel, And this is why, I pulled together 9 of my friends, and we decided that we want to help the immigrants in Chicago. There's a lot of wonderful social services in Chicago, but they don't have services that provide bilingual services to people with limited English. And so I graduated from Sioux City, Iowa, and then went on to do social work. I want to make sure that I represent the voice of the voiceless, which is often the case when we meet our clients, and I also want to make sure that we protect the rights of the immigrants. And so this is why we collaborate with a lot of other nonprofits to do that, fighting for immigration reform, fighting for voters registration. We have a lot of volunteers that go around and prepare our individuals to become citizens, and then also to get them to register to vote. And so the last couple of years in our small area, we have registered over 1,200 individuals, new immigrants, to be citizens. Okay. So I just wanted to say that I'm losing my thoughts. I'm sorry. But today, we started the agency 32 years ago with a desk and a chair, and I was the first executive director. And right now we have over 400 staff, and as moderators say, we have over $12 million in budget. And we serve over 17,000 individuals a year with children all ages. And a lot of time people ask me, why do you want to provide this service or that service? We started our child care very early on because I saw a mother holding the baby in the back while working 10 hours in the restaurants, and that really hurts me. So we started the child care, and our very first family, came in crying because she said, now I can bring my child back from China because there's nobody who took care of him here. and they had to send their infants to China, and they brought them back. So every single thing that we try to do, we try to meet the needs of the community, you know. And I'm taking up a little bit too much time.
Thank you, Bernie, and what a beautiful message that you leave us with that I think does, in fact, play very well and continues promoting Cesar Chavez's legacy, which is so many champions of change that are out there. Rob, can you tell us how you live the legacy of Cesar Chavez in your work in the community?
Well, I think one part of Cesar's legacy is that he inspired me and hundreds of other young lawyers to pursue a career as a farm worker legal services lawyer. And today, and in past years, throughout the United States and rural communities everywhere, many times there's no union to protect farm workers, there's no organization, but there's a young legal services attorney who's trying to do his best to enforce workers' rights. And so that's a very big legacy. We see our work at the Migrant Farm Worker Justice Project as lying at the intersection of economic justice and fair immigration reform. You can't really solve the farm worker problem in the United States until you solve both of those questions. Everybody knows that 2/3 of the farm workers today in the United States are unauthorized, have no legal status to be here, a fact that touches the lives of each and every American every time they sit down and have a glass of orange juice or have a salad. It affects us all. And obviously, one facet of the problem is that we have to pass an immigration reform that gives legal status and a path to citizenship to those workers. But that's not really enough, because there's another side of it that I think right now is not being talked about enough. And that is, even if we gave every farm worker in the country a green card, the majority of farm workers would still live very hard, desperate lives in poverty. And they still would be subjected to unlawful wages and working conditions every single day. So there's also that struggle for economic justice, for enforcement of farm workers' rights. And ultimately, you know, the best protection is a union. But realizing that that won't happen tomorrow, in the meantime, we've got to do everything we can to enforce the existing rights and laws to protect farm workers. And we have to extend rights to the many farm workers. I mean, it's unbelievable that in 15 states in our country do not even have the decency to extend the basic protection of workers' compensation to farm workers. That should be a shame and something, a scandal, and something that we should not accept. So I guess that's, you know, and that battle, like I say, these struggles have gone on and on and on and won't end anytime soon. And I think Cesar's legacy is that you need to have the heart to keep on fighting that battle over and over every day.
Thank you, Rob, and I think that also ties in with what Cesar said about hay más tiempo que vida. There is indeed a lot of work to be done and time to work on these issues, which ties in really nicely with Don Rogelio, who has been a farm worker for 47 years. Can you tell us, Don Rogelio, what you believe is the legacy of Cesar Chavez and how you're able to promote it and further it in your work?
Okay, good afternoon. My native language is Spanish, but I want to try to speak English. I'm going to start with briefly of my story when I know and I hear to Cesar Chavez. I was born on Mexico on Guanajuato. When I was young, I moved to Mexico City. I went to school. But my family was a family of 6, and my father can't support our family alone. And our culture in Mexico He's the oldest son, or sometimes daughter, uh, uh, needs to help to support the family. And my father was a carpenter, and he has many forms to make to make money for our life. But on that time was very hard for living and no work. He didn't find work, and he came to United States in order. He was a bracero for a long time, and when I finished my my elementary school in part of high school, I have to come here with him to help in order to feed our five brothers, because we are a family of 6 brothers. Then I was young, I was 15 or 16 years old, and I came to the fields to work. I didn't know anything about the fields. When I work on the strawberries, sometimes I take off the plant of the strawberries against the weed, and I didn't know nothing about that, and it was very hard for me. And I work a lot of the cortito, the small hoe. I work for a mile to doing that job. Then I remember on close to 72, on 70s, I was working picking strawberries when we hear Cesar Chavez came from Sacramento, and in the place of my work, everybody stopped, and was like a hope for us, because we had very hard. We work on 17 years. We live on the fields, and we work on the mat. It was very hard for us, and I remember when I hear Cesar Chavez, everybody stopped, and our boss tell us, we're gonna raise you 25 cents per hour more. I remember I make 85 cents per hour, but we don't accept that, the farmer closed the doors, and we went to any place to work. On 81, I came to Morgan Hill, and I work in a mushroom factory, and we hear again on Cesar Chavez came in a ranch near from there, and we call him, and we make a strike for 96 days. Since that time, anytime I remember Cesar Chavez, I learned something from him, many things. I don't work side by side with him, but we continuously we met with him, and we received a lot of experience from him. And after that, I still working with the United Farm Workers all the time on March, on negotiate our contracts, to make a vote for the political parties for our laws. We went to Sacramento, on California, for marches and vigilias, and I tried to help the other people, and on the last times we come for We came to Washington. I come 4 times for asking for ag jobs, and that's why I remember Cesar Chavez, and for me, Cesar Chavez is my hero, and I remember many, many, many things of him. I have a lot of remembers. For example, when we have a contract, we make a meeting, a general meeting, and we invite him, and he told us, remember, fight all the time. Camarón que se duerme se lo lleva la corriente. That's the word I remember for him. And many teams. And another time, we was negotiated, and we make it like a strike again for 6 months. For 6 months on my place, and in my committee, when he came, we was on arresting and boring, and he said, "You never gonna win like this. Hey, get up, come to work." And we started to organize again, and we win the time again. And this, and I try to do everything to help others, but with a guy of Cesar Chavez that I learned of him. That's what can I tell you. Thank you.
Thank you, Don Rogelio. And just to be clear, camarón que se duerme se lo lleva la corriente basically means if you snooze, you lose, which is pretty appropriate for our champions of change who have worked very hard. And Mary Jo, if you can reflect on how the legacy of Cesar Chavez continues in the work that you do.
Thank you. I was very fortunate to have been part of a television program. We did a public access television program, and I interviewed Cesar many years ago. And what was really amazing about that was that in talking with him, he had things to say, but he also really wanted to engage me. I was a young, I didn't know a lot. I was young, but I had energy, and I was interested in him. And he said, well, what do you think? He was telling his story, but he was also asking, well, what do you think? What do you think should happen? And so that engagement of different people from different walks of life, of different ages, I think, has been a critical piece for me. And also how one approaches it. And so really, okay, can we do this? Sí se puede. Sí se puede. Building around, yes, we can. Yes, we can. And I think I'm very fortunate to be in a university environment where there's an opportunity for students to engage with farm workers and go to farms and talk with people and learn about them. And I'm honored I'm pleased to accept this honor, but I really want to keep in people's minds that it's not about me, it's about the farm workers, and I want people to have this picture when they get the apple off the shelf. And I also, when they drink their milk, I want them to have this picture in their mind. And that's one of the things that the students are excellent about doing. How do you put a different image in people's minds? You wouldn't have that apple unless someone was working on that. And so I think engaging young people in the lives of farm workers and farm workers in the lives of our students has been a tremendous opportunity for me to see that happening. And I brought a picture because it's the students who go out and teach the English classes and the farm workers who take their day off to learn English. And it goes far beyond the English classes itself. It has to do about breaking the social and geographic isolation that many of the workers in our state experience. And also just sort of walking people through things that they can do to prepare themselves for an emergency. And we live in a state where the vast majority of the farm workers are improperly documented. And so every day, people don't think about New York State as a border state, but we are a border state. We have the Border Patrol along the Canadian border, around Lake Ontario. And so every day when people make that decision, for unauthorized people, if they make that decision to walk out of their house to go buy milk for their kids, there's a risk. And so I think that really, for me, it's really important to make that visible, that when you look at the apple, this is not only a person who works long, hard hours in a very physically demanding work, but sometimes these people have that extra stress of being unauthorized. And so engaging students in this program has been critical because it's a multiplier effect. And students have tremendous energy, and I really believe that we need to have this be an issue for our youth, for the next generation. And so I think in accepting this honor, I really want to make it clear that it's only possible because the farm workers opened their homes to us. And to remember where that comes from, and to keep also in our minds, when we look at a difficult issue, can we look at it and say, sí se puede? That's one thing I think that really sticks with me every day.
Mary Jo, it's a multiplier effect, and indeed it is. I'd like to see if Elvira Diaz can talk to us about the legacy of Cesar Chavez in her work.
I'm an immigrant, so I was not very familiar with the history of the United States. When I came here, I had the opportunity to I went to Catholic school, so I went to non-school, girls' school. So I immigrated here, and then I went to learn English. And in the nuns, they helped me, they teach me to do volunteer work. So the only place I can volunteer was at the Catholic Church. I become a religious teacher. And I already went to all the masses and to my life for that, but I just have the passion to help. So I remember in 1992, I was teaching at the first communion class. I have 40 students. At that time, I have a little girl. She was 7 years old. And I remember nobody was paying attention to me. Something was wrong. Something was in the air so weird. So I remember asking the students, what's wrong? At that time, Bill Wilson was going to put a preposition 187. And I remember we reached out to the pastor and to all the people to help me, and nobody listened to me. I was kind of young. So you know what I did? I have 40 students, so I make 40 phone calls. And I told the students, let's meet at the most busy street in Huntington Beach, Beach Boulevard, so we can have signs, and we have the No 187 sign. My surprise, I have 200 students in the street, no parents. I was the only adult there. I was the only one who has the permission to be in the streets and to do that. So that makes me tied to Cesar Chavez, that you can start something very small and just have the courage and just doing that. And I remember my little girl, now she's 22, screaming "Si se puede" and no 187, and that preposition didn't pass. And today, we're still fighting for the Dream Act. Today, as I'm sitting here today, my organization where I work, 6 Dreamers are in Reno, Nevada today. They're walking from San Francisco to DC. They're walking because they want to have documents. So from 1992 until today, I'm still fighting, but I'm not going to give up. I have after 15 years, I have another little kid, Christian. Christian now is 7 years old. And I remember in 2006 when we had the famous marches in May 1st, we have in Carson City about 2,000 people. The first word that my little kid learned in his life was "si se puede." So it's like, we need to keep working together and put the views together. 2 weeks ago, I had the opportunity to walk the Montgomery to Selma. They asked me to walk, so many miles. So I said, okay, I'm going to join in the middle of the week. They start from Monday, they finish on Friday. I said, I don't think I'm going to be able to walk. So I was on Wednesday walking, and guess who I found in the middle of the walking? Dolores Huerta. And I asked her, are you Dolores Huerta? Yes. So I walked with her, and I grabbed her, and the last day of the march, because we're like several days, they just dropped me because, I'm an organizer. They just dropped me. You join those people, and we'll pick you up later. And I walked with Al Sharpton. And with, so my idea is together we can do it. One thing that we need to do, besides marching and besides saying, si se puede, we need to register people to vote right now. Register people to vote. Our power is our vote. One of the things that I've been working, and that's probably what I got nominated by Families USA, was the health reform. February 2nd of last year, Jasmine Ayala had pneumonia with her friend. Jasmine didn't have health insurance. She passed away. So since she passed away, they called me and she told me, the mom told me she died in between hospitals because she was, don't have documents and she didn't have Medicare. So I'm really, really fighting right now for the health reform. So together we need to do it. We need really to participate. Doesn't matter what party you belong, but please register people to vote and vote in the primaries so the people that you like get elected and go vote again in the final ones in November. So voting is our vote. Young people, please, that's what I'm asking you. The Si Se Puede is in your vote. So please vote and vote for the issues that affect your family. We need to really have documents for these 12 million people who doesn't have documents, for these farmers that don't have documents, for Jasmine that didn't have access to healthcare, and she already died. She's 11 years old. I'm sure she's watching me in heaven. So we need to keep fighting and keep working together. And like Cesar Chavez mentioned, you mentioned that he said you need to look for somebody who can help you. If you cannot do by yourself, knock doors and ask somebody to help you. And si se puede, we can do it. Thank you so much.
It doesn't matter what party you belong to, said Elvira, just register to vote. And can I please get a si se puede after that?
Si se puede, si se puede, si se puede.
And we're going to go now to the Twitterverse, the cyber space, which is just really engaged with what's happening today. Very quickly, I just want to thank partners today, NCLR being Latino Hispanicized, Fox News Latino, Voto Latino, the proposed National Latino Museum, and Latina Bloggers Connect, who are vibrantly amplifying what is happening in this room. We go to Jose Torres from San Francisco, California, who asks, what will it take to achieve Cesar's dream of farm workers across this country having the same rights and protections as other working people? I don't know, Rob, if you'd like to take a stab.
Well, I suppose the first answer is organizing on a nationwide, massive scale. But when you think about it, I mean, still, after the, 70 years after the New Deal, farm workers are not covered by the National Labor Relations Act, are not covered by overtime provisions of the Fair Labor Standards Act. As I've said, in many states are not covered by workers' compensation. So one thing we need is we need to elect legislators and Congress people that are going to correct this inequity. The other thing, of course, it comes back to the whole question of immigration reform. Even if farm workers have rights on paper, it's very difficult to enforce those rights if you're afraid. If you know the employer can report you or somebody can report you to the Immigration Service. And so part of it is we've got to change, we've got to give people that basic legal status as one of the first steps.
Thank you, Rob. And Don Rogelio, I'd like to ask you, because you've been working as a farm worker for 47 years, if you could tell us what you believe it's going to take to achieve Cesar's dream of farm workers across this country having the same rights and protections as other working people. Sí, iba a decir si puede en español.
Puede decirme
¿A la pregunta?
Ajá.
Sí, a la pregunta es, ¿qué es lo que usted piensa necesita ocurrir para que el sueño de César Chávez de extenderle las protecciones a los que trabajan en los campos, que ellos tengan las mismas protecciones que tienen otros trabajadores?
Um, Sí, I think we have to work together to keep organized more people, because the dream of Cesar was that we have to organize ourselves and administrate our contracts ourselves. And when he found that the union, United Farm Workers, was for the same people administrate the contract, and I think we have to keep working. This never end. The fight never end. We have to keep organized, to keep voting for our people to help the campesinos, the people who needs to make a change. And we have to enforce. We have a lot of laws in California and I think in other countries too. We work hard for those laws, for drinking water on the fields and everything, but we have to work hard to enforce those laws, because we have many laws. The United Farm Workers is a small union, but it's the union to want more laws on California and the whole country. But we have to work for enforce those laws, because it's not sense if we want something and we don't have benefits of that. That's what I think, to still to keep working, and I think that the fight that Cesar Chavez began, this never end, because.
Thank you, Don Rogelio.
Okay.
I don't mean to be disrespectful and cut you off, but we only have a couple more minutes. One more question from cyberspace comes from Matri Bamo. She asks, how do we inspire continued activism around the passage of a national DREAM Act? And I'd like to see who would like to take a stab at that. And if we can keep it brief and maybe get one more person to answer, that'd be awesome.
That would be nice that dreamers start being out and talking to your friends, do a lot of one-on-ones, reach out your church community, your neighbors, go to your schools, go to your teachers, don't be shy. There's a lot of dreamers going out already, so reach out to them, and if you're afraid to just coming out, just you can tweet them and you can promote them, so that way the information of the dreamers gets across. So people see it as the very injustice. So also try to do lobbies to your legislators. Legislators are very important. So try really, and again, register people to vote and vote first. So that way we have enough votes to pass the DREAM Act.
Thank you, Elvira. Bernie?
I just want to say to both the first and second questions, it is really important to educate. And I guess I'm kind of in a minority here, because so much of this issue is around the Latino, community. But there needs to be a lot of education beyond that, to the Asian community, to the the Caucasian community. I think I'm a little ashamed to say that for our community, this is not as as well known, even though we as as an agency, we do work on it along with the Latino and other organizations. But I think education is really, really important, especially with the younger population.
And Mary Jo, very quickly, is there anything you'd like to add on either of these questions?
Well, I think it's important to, just from the DREAM Act, to work in whatever arena you can work in. Our Dreamers at Cornell University actually got the president of the university to make a very strong statement in support of the passage of the DREAM Act, and for him to advocate among his colleagues, presidents of university. And so he has been working on the DREAM Act. And so I think whatever arena you can work in, we need to work. But I think the other piece of it, and it ties back to the farm worker issue, is we find many, many families, farm worker families, in which the parents and the children have differential status. So US-born children with undocumented parents. This is very, very common. And what happens when the parents are picked up? What happens to the kids? And to make that clear to the public is a critical piece for the DREAM Act, for farm workers, for the well-being of the immigrant community, which our economy relies on. And to make that picture clear, I think, is a critical piece of getting comprehensive immigration reform passed. And we each have a role in that.
Thank you, Elvira Diaz, Mary Jo Dudley, Rogelio Lona, Rob Williams, and Bernie Wong for the continued work and sacrifice you do and for embodying the legacy of Cesar Chavez, being champions of change.
And thank you, Viviana, for being here today to moderate that wonderful panel. Once again, Elvira, Rogelio, Bernardo, Rob, and Mary Jo, thank you. And Mary Jo, I want to say sorry for leaving out your intro before, but I would like to say I had the pleasure of meeting some of your students who graduated from Cornell at an event a few weeks ago, and they were working to give microloans to immigrants and give so that they could own their own plots of land in upstate New York, and the work was inspiring. So thank you for what you're doing. One more round of applause, please, for that first panel. And I would also like to take a moment to thank everyone who's watching via online. We are live streaming this, so anyone who is watching, and we thank you for being engaged, and we thank you for listening to this conversation that is such an important and critical conversation for us to be having as a nation at this moment. And now I'd like to introduce all the members of our second panel. We'll begin with Reverend Eve Nunez, is the founder and president of Help for Kids, a national partner with the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Phoenix, Arizona. Help for Kids serves as a SNAP satellite, providing food boxes for homeless families in the Arizona Valley. Help for Kids served approximately 1,680 meals per week last summer for the First Lady's Let's Move initiative. The Help for Kids HUD office also provides services where clients can apply for and participate in rental assistance, first-time homebuyers program, foreclosure prevention, and loan modifications. Nita Gonzalez of Denver, Colorado, is a noted community activist, educator, and nationally recognized leader in the struggle for social justice and equality. Nita is the president CEO of, I'm going to try to pronounce this correctly, Escuela Tlatelolco. How'd that do? Yeah. Good, okay. Escuela Tlatelolco Centro de Estudios, a nationally recognized model for Chicano, Mexicano, and indigenous education. She is a founder of the Chicano Mexicano Education Coalition, the Denver Youth Employment and Education Task Force, and co-founder of the Colorado Latino Forum. Melinda Wiggins, For over 15 years, Melinda has served as the Executive Director of Student Action with Farm Workers, a nonprofit whose mission is to bring students and farm workers together to learn about each other's lives, share resources and skills, improve conditions for farm workers, and build diverse coalitions working for social change. During her tenure at SAF, she has worked to impact over 600 young people and countless supporters, partners, and allies through mentorship and community engagement. Rose Garcia is the Executive Director of Tierra del Sol Housing Corporation, a New Mexico nonprofit corporation and a leading regional affordable housing and community development organization. Rose has worked for over 30 years to improve the quality of life for the rural poor minorities, farm workers, and the elderly in small towns and rural areas along the United States-Mexico border. She works closely with partners in both the public and private sectors to deliver services and meet the needs of people of New Mexico and the Southwest. Nancy M. Cubano is a native of Puerto Rico. Prior to coming to KIPP, the Knowledge is Power program, a network of public charter schools in Philadelphia, Nancy taught for 13 years as a Spanish teacher in Harrisburg and in Gettysburg, where she became passionate about her community and her role as a teacher. Nancy's goal and big project is to see her Chavez Advisory students make it to and through college. Our panelists for our second panel. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our moderator for the second panel. He is one of the Obama administration's shining stars, and he happens to come from the Latino community. Secretary of the Interior Ken Salazar is leading a national effort to recognize the contributions of Latinos to the history of America, including Cesar Chavez. Salazar's own family history began in the American West before the United States was a country. After settling in New Mexico 4 centuries ago, his family planted roots in Colorado's San Luis Valley, where they have farmed and ranched the same land for 5 generations. Raised on a remote ranch without electricity or telephone, Salazar learned the values of hard work, family, and faith. Thanks to his parents' lessons, he and his 7 brothers and sisters all became first-generation college graduates. Join me in welcoming to the stage the 50th Secretary of the Department of the Interior, Secretary Ken Salazar.
Thank you very much, America, for that kind introduction and for this great panelists. You honor us, and you're a great role model for so many young people. In fact, on my way over here to this meeting, my security detail was talking about how they and their children have watched you, and they're so excited about what you do. So let's give her a round of applause, because she's a champion of change as well. And let me just give a quick shout out to all of the honorees here, not only this panel, but the one from before, Elvira Diaz, Eve Nunez, Mary Jo Dudley, Rob Williams, Anita Gonzalez, Rogelio Luna, Bernarda Wong, Melinda Wiggins, Rose Garcia, and Nancy Cubano. They are some of the very best of the best that we have in the United States of America, so give them all a round of applause. We have some special guests that will be joining us very soon, and so we're going to have to keep this panel relatively short, and we'll end at about 3. So I want to hear from the panel, and I'll go join them in just a minute. But I thought what I would do is to make some opening comments here just about what the President has directed his cabinet to do relative to an inclusive America, because it is so important for us to make sure that as we move forward, as the demographics of America continue to change, as diversity becomes so much a part of the foundation for the greatness of this nation in the future, that we are making sure that we are inclusive of everybody so that no one gets left behind. So as a Secretary of the Interior, I have the great honor of serving this President of the United States, Barack Obama, as we have moved forward in trying to change the world in a lot of different ways. But in my own lane, and one of the things that I have the honor of doing is being the custodian of America's natural resources and natural heritage. That means, yes, I'm responsible for everything that's happening in our oceans and our 700 million acres of onshore lands, and dealing with oil and gas and renewable energy and our national parks, our wildlife refuges, all of those things that are so important. But as part of that mission, yes, custodian of natural resources, but also custodians of America's history and heritage. And so it's in that vein that I'm very proud to say that the work that we have done there is to recognize that we have so much more work to do, and our work really is just beginning. But I'll give you an example in the African American world, which is very much a part of our world and very much a part of the civil rights struggle of America and our march towards a more perfect union. This president moved forward with the creation of the 396 National Park at Fort Monroe, which was the beginning and the end of slavery in America and the crucible for the thinking of Abraham Lincoln in the Emancipation Proclamation. This president moved forward, and we have now, for the first time in history, the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial on the National Mall, right between the Lincoln and the Jefferson Memorial. And we're doing it in a lot of other ways, from Ebenezer Chapel to the work that we do all around the country to make sure that we recognize that part of our history. In addition, it's not just about African Americans, it's also about the Japanese Americans and the internment camps. Or just in the last week, we honored 12 of those internment camps with significant investments so that we don't forget what happened to Japanese American citizens during that time in the 1940s, where we basically took them from their home and took their liberties away and placed them in internment camps right here in the midst of our own country. And we've gone beyond Japanese Americans. It's really also about the celebration and telling the story of women and their contribution to this country, because those stories have not been told. Today, only 4% of all of the national historic landmarks, and those are historic landmarks which essentially mean that they're the highest level of recognition that you can give historically from the United States of America, under the authority of the Secretary of Interior. Only 4% of all of those that have been created in history recognize the contributions of women, African Americans, Latinos, Native Americans, and so on and so forth. So that statistic alone tells you how much more work that we have to do. Which brings me to the contributions of the Latino community. Yes, as America said in her introduction of me, yes, my family, along with Nita's family and so many of you here, we've been around in this country and in these United States for a long time, even before the Spanish came, because many of us are very proudly Native American as well. And in the case of my family in northern New Mexico, I love to remind people of the fact that we settled the city of Santa Fe, Nuevo Mexico, the city of Holy Faith. And we were there for 250 years before the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was signed in 1848. And so when the treaty was signed, and Article 10 of the treaty said, well, if you are a resident now of these southwestern places, which now will become part of the United States, you have an option. You go move across the newly formed border, or you can stay where you have been staying and become part of the United States of America. And if you do so, then your rights and your history and your heritage and your lands and your culture will be protected. Well, I always like to remind people that we are part of either the Spanish sovereignty or the Mexican sovereignty in the Southwest for 250 years before we became part of the United States of America. And yet, much of that history has not yet been told. And as many of you have heard in some of the speeches that you may have listened to me before, when I was going to school, I still remember in the San Luis Valley, where I would look out at the Sangre de Cristo Mountains to the east and the San Juan Mountains to the west, and the San Antonio River that runs through part of our ranch, that we were still being taught that my family had come across on the Mayflower, that we had been a part of the founding of Plymouth Rock, and that we'd gone from east to west. So that's just a long way of telling you all here again that we have so much more to do in terms of telling the story of Latinos and Latinas throughout the United States of America. So in the Department of Interior, what we have done is move forward with the founding of the Latino Heritage Initiative, which will, by June of this year, we will be able to announce the conclusion of essentially what will be the blueprint of the story of Latinos. So will guide the National Park Service long after I am gone, but it will make sure that we are telling the story of the farm workers, of immigration, of economics, of the military contributions of Latinos, and so on and so forth. 16 different chapters in that study. We'll have that done by June of this year. That then will guide us in terms of making sure that we're telling the whole story of the contribution of American Latinos and Latinas. But we don't want to wait for that study to come by our way, and so just last year I had the great honor of standing with the Chavez family at the 40-acre site in California, where we said this place where Cesar Chavez fasted for all those days in the 1970s and in the 1960s, 1968, the longest of his fast before Robert Kennedy and Ethel Kennedy visited him and he broke his fast, that place is a place that has a very important role in our history, and that place should be a national historic landmark, and we made it so, and I'm very proud of the fact that we did it. Under this president, you also will be hearing a lot more about some of our efforts in terms of the recognition and the contribution of Latinos throughout the United States of America. And I would just say this because I know him very well. I spent 2 days with him last week in Nevada and New Mexico and Oklahoma. He believes in his heart what you all believe in your heart, and that is that our continuing march towards a more perfect union means that everybody has to be a part of that march, and that the Latino community is very much a part of that march. So I am very proud to be here with the honorees today, and to be able to moderate this panel. So with that, I guess I could go sit down there, but I think it's better if I just sit down here and look at you need done the rest of the panelists. Or am I supposed to move with it? Can I stand? Can I stand? Okay. So how many of you think Cesar Chavez is a big deal? Okay. Earlier this week at the Department of Labor, one of the nation's wisest Latinas, Hilda Solis, our Secretary of Labor, named the big hall in the Department of Labor in the honor of Cesar Chavez. So it now bears his name as a leader whose life is now recognized there in the Department of Labor. And as we were there, it was very obvious with Dolores Huerta and the family and others that he contributed so much to what we are today and the opportunities that we all have. So I think the question that I would ask the panel, and let us remember that we are actually live on Facebook here and other video. And so that the question, this first question, which came in from Facebook, is this: what does the Cesar Chavez's legacy mean to you today? And how does your work relate to that legacy? So let us take a couple of minutes and say a little bit about yourself and respond to that question. And why don't we just start here with you, Rose, and then we'll go down to Nita and on down the road. So start with you, Rose. And give Rose another round of applause. Yes. You know, she is a true champion for all the great work that she's done.
Thank you, Senator. You were a senator, but you're secretary.
Once a senator, always a senator.
Same thing. Okay. Yes, thank you very much for inviting me to this wonderful event, and also for the recognition of my work, which represents many of the people that are leaders in my community that inspired the work that I'm doing and have devoted most of my life. And in answer to your question, I think what means Cesar Chavez's work means to me today is to continue the work of what Tierra del Sol Housing Corporation is doing in New Mexico and West Texas with farm workers in converting the volunteer labor that farm workers are willing to do because they know how to toil in the fields with low pay and much distress in also building their own homes for self-help through self-help housing. And I think that the continuation of the leadership in the community in the Southwest and the relationship that we had with Cesar Chavez while he was alive made a lot of good changes in our community with field standards that were improved, as well as the abolishment of short hoe, and and on every year that he came into New Mexico. We identified many of the improvements that are in our communities today.
Thank you very much, Rose. For New Mexico and for Texas, great places with great Latino communities and great leaders like Rose. Give her a round of applause. Nita Gonzalez from Colorado. I have this, I was going to write this that says Nita 93 because I was her campaign chairman when she ran for the school board back in 1993. So anyway, Nita, what's your response to the question? And tell us a little bit about you.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for this honor, and also just to recognize that I sit here because of my father, Rodolfo Jorge Gonzalez. We're a family of 8, an activist family. I grew up as an activist family, and learning the history, quite frankly, Ken, as you well know, from the Mother Earth, from here out, not from the East End in my house. So, and that I want to share with you that the work we do, which was really included in the introduction, Escuela Tlatelolco is the mother of school reform and choice. 7 parents out of the Crusade for Justice were bold enough to start their own school when Denver public schools would not meet the needs of our youngsters, and our children weren't succeeding academically. So here we are 41 years later, serving pre-K through 12, a very different model. Most of your models are separated out, pre-K through 12, as familia, in a school with 401 of our graduates, and of those graduates, 72% have their bachelor's degree, 32% own their own businesses, and 22% have their graduate degrees and never once forgot where they came from and are still activists in their community today. That's the job of education. Not only to give you And so I sit here because of Rodolfo Jorge Gonzalez and my mother. I mean, I have to mention her. She lives in my household. There's 8 of us. And my dad had to come screaming and kicking to feminism since he had six girls and 2 sons. And because of the legacy of Cesar Chavez and Helen Chavez. Cesar could not do what he did. I understand that without Helen being part of that. So that legacy for me has always been about that, yes, we can. I never think about, do you ever go into meetings where people say, well, we can't do that because of this or the budget or where's the money? I never start a meeting that way. I say, what do we want to do? And let's figure out how to do it. And while I agree that we have to get our youngsters educated and prepared to vote, they need to know why they vote, and they need to hold politicians accountable to meet the agenda that is a people's agenda. That's a legacy of Cesar Chavez for me. And I really am honored to be here, and I'm honored to be along with the other 9 champions here with you. I'm just so humbled by all the work that you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Nita. And Nancy Cubano. The Puerto Rican population of our nation and the Puerto Rico is just such an important part of our history, and yet so often a forgotten part of the history of America. But I think some 4 million population in the island, and probably even more of a greater population even in the United States. So tell us, what's your answer to the question, a little bit about you?
Sure, so I'm gonna start by answering, a little bit about me, but first, just like Nita and everybody here, I'm honored to be here around, all of you. So a little bit about myself. I came from a family of, there was no if. You are going to go to college. There was no thinking about it. It was just, you knew you were going to go to college. My grandmother did, my parents did, and everybody in my family did. When I came here to the United States, I saw the need of Latinos wanting to go to college. To me, it was like, why is it that you're thinking about it? Or you don't think about it, just you have to go to college. And now I'm working at a school where that's their sole purpose, just like Cesar Chavez was wanting to just community, knowledge is power. That's exactly what I'm trying to do with my students. And our advisory is something that we call in KIP, it's more than a homeroom. This homeroom is 15 kids that are with me from 10th grade all the way through, to the graduating seniors in high school. So I'm like their mom. So I don't just have one kid at home, I have 15 at school. And KIP gives us a cell phone. So those kids can actually call us. So there's no excuse. There's no if. There's no excuses. So that's one thing. And 2 years ago, when the principal called me and he told me, well, we need to pick a name for each advisory. So what do you think, what name would be appropriate for your advisory? Automatically, I thought of Cesar Chavez. Who else? The core values were just blended just perfectly with the core values of the school: leadership, community service, and that's basically what I'm trying to aim for my students, for not just to go to college, to go through college and give back to the community. So that's basically my goal.
Thank you, Nancy. Let me turn it over to Reeve, Help for Kids. Keep going.
Yes.
We want to hear from you. It's about the children.
I am just overwhelmed today, and I wanted to thank the Chavez family. I want to thank Julie and Christina, Cesar, Oscar, all the Chavez family, and Alejandro, who's in Phoenix, Arizona. And I was recruited by Cesar Chavez when I was 17 years old. And he came to a restaurant where I was at and started asking me about my life, and I told him my dad was a migrant farm worker, and he says, you know, they only pay your dad $1 an hour when they're paying everybody else $2.25 an hour, and that made me mad, because my dad had 17 kids at home, and he told me, well, you know, that he had a small hole and that he was hurting his back, and I said, that's true. So he recruited me when I was only 17 years old, and I remember Cesar told me, we need young people like you. We need you to help us pass flyers and go to these grocery stores that are selling grapes and lettuce. And people are buying it, but it's hurting our people. But he spoke his story to me with such compassion that at that young age that I said, I have to get behind this man and do. So I called my mom and I said, Mom, I'm going to go do a huelga. And she says, ¿Qué estás loca, amiga? ¿Vas a hacer que es una huelga? And I said, well, this man is going to help Dad. Dad won't have to work so hard. He's going to give him a big hole. He won't have to, you know, work with that small hole. And Mom, I'll introduce him to Dad, and Dad will like him because he's going to help him. So I introduced Cesar to my dad. And that same day that I met Cesar, I went to boycott outside a grocery store. And my first day outside a grocery store, I was passing flyers and telling people not to buy lettuce because or grapes either because my dad got paid less. One of the ladies that came up to me and that I told her not to buy was shorter than me. She literally slapped me because I gave her a flyer. I mean, this was in the 70s when they would get away with that. But then I passed out my flyers and I wiped my mascara off my face because they didn't have waterproof mascara in those days. And I went back and I said, Cesar, this is what happened to me. And he says, ¿Qué te pasó? And I said, well, they gave me a cachetada. And he says, that's why God gave you two cheeks, mija. Turn the other cheek. And I mean, instead of saying, you know, being compassionate, I said, okay. So I just wiped off my face and I kept working. But I learned from this man the compassion that he had for people. And I want to thank the Chavez family so much for letting your tata, letting him to us and giving us his vision. I had just become a Christian. I wanted to become a minister. And I said, God, I want to do something big. I want to help somebody. And guess who walks into the restaurant I was working in that day? Cesar Chavez. That was my first one. That was my first volunteer job, and we went and did huelgas in Marana, Arizona, San Luis. My sister Gloria went with us, and so what we are doing today is we are continuing the vision that he had to mentor young people, which I do through Help for Kids. Some of the laws in Arizona are making it very difficult for me to continue what I do. The Senate Bill 1070, which I opposed, put a screeching halt to my ministry. I had 14 buses where I was picking up young people from the age of 18 under. That means 1,400 or 1,500 people, young students I was picking up, most of from immigrant families and refugees. I was picking them up to feed them every week. But when they signed that bill in my state, I could no longer do that because we would become felons. So it put a screeching halt to that. So what I'm doing is I'm doing a lot of voter registration, mentoring a lot of young people, and getting the right people in public office because we need to vote out those people that are doing inhumane acts in my state. And I have to thank Alejandro Chavez, who's not here, but he helped me in my campaign. I ran for state senator, and my daughter, Hannah Nunez, who was only 16 at the time, they worked really hard. We got 46 young people to help us in Arizona to get people registered, and I almost won, but I'm going to run again, and we're going to keep running, because I'm going to live a long time.
Thank you, Reverend, and let's turn over to Melinda, who continues to work with the UFW and the kids.
Yes, but you can't call them kids.
Children.
Well, I got started, I learned about Cesar Chavez when he died. The spring that Cesar Chavez died is when I got involved with the farm worker movement. So 1993, I had just left my home of Mississippi Delta, came to North Carolina to go to divinity school at Duke, and was studying theology and trying to figure out what to do with my life. Knew I wanted to do something to give back to my community, and I ended up doing an internship with Student Action with Farm Workers. And the messages of Cesar are part of what we teach in that work, both the messages and how we do the work. But some of the messages that really resonated with me that I think Chavez stood for was this intersection between race, class, and culture. And so that is really what we try to do, is look at issues of racism in our communities in the South. Farm workers, there's a lot of racism. The majority of folks are Mexican and Mexican-American, but we still have a lot of African-American folks who work in the fields whose parents and grandparents and great-grandparents have worked in the fields and who came here as slaves. So we have this legacy in the South that we have to talk about, that we have to learn from, and that we have to teach young people about. He also talked about class, about labor. For me, it was very much resonated from me growing up in a working class family in the Mississippi Delta and in a very segregated community. These issues of race and class I continued to struggle with them and figure out. I wanted to learn, and part of what we do is teaching young people about that intersection and what happens to people when both race and class, when they're both impacted by both race and class, which we all are, of course, no matter if you're oppressed or privileged on those sides. And the last piece is around culture. You know, this morning we were at the USDA and there was a mention of Teatro Campesino, and one of the things that we do with Student Action with Farm Workers is bring culture into the work. So helping young people particularly tell their own stories. And that was the most powerful part for me in getting involved with Student Action with Farm Workers, is learning to tell my own story as a white woman from the Mississippi Delta who grew up in a very racist community. What is my story in this movement? And part of it was, because of my work with SAF, I started asking questions in my own family and learned about my own family's experience as sharecroppers. I learned that my dad had to drop out of school at 6th grade to work in the fields. They don't talk about this history. So it really has taken me down this long path, this rabbit hole of learning about my own history, and that's one of the things that we do with young people. Majority of the young people we work with are from farm worker families. So unlike me, they have worked in the fields themselves, their parents are working in the fields, but part of what we do is help them to learn, to really learn about the larger socioeconomic political issues that impact their family. We help them to act. So do meaningful work in their communities through direct service, through educating workers about pesticide safety, through organizing in North Carolina, supporting the Farm Labor Organizing Committee, another union to lift up, as well as to advocate for changes in the law, which we heard about earlier. We need to equalize the law for farm workers. It makes no sense, other than if we want to continue to have a racist classist society, to have farm workers treated differently under the law. So we try to provide these meaningful opportunities for young people to act. And then there's another part of it that I think Chavez lifted up, is to reflect on that. So let's learn, let's go deep and learn, let's act and do something, and then let's reflect on what does this mean for ourselves and share that with other people. So I've been really fortunate to be involved with SAF we're celebrating 20 years this year, and so we've had like 700 young people we've worked with deeply from across the country who come to the South to learn particularly about what's the story of the South around agriculture and labor and workers, and to do something for their families, for their communities. And I think that one of the messages that we share with young people that really is about Cesar Chavez's legacy is that we're in this for the long haul. Whenever at the beginning we have summer internships, we bring 25 people together to work in the South with farm worker groups, and we always say at the end of their internship, now's the beginning, right? Because the idea is that this is work that we will do, as Rogelio mentioned. It's taken a long time to create this discrimination against farm workers in our community. It's going to take a long time to change it, but we're trying to build a movement of young people who are knowledgeable, who are willing to take a stand and willing to go deep in their own story to share that for the long haul. So, the long haul.
You know, Melinda, on your closing comment there on the long haul, the Chavez family one point told me about one of Cesar's sayings, which was not his, it was his mother. And it was his mom who taught him this saying, and he would say, she would say to him, hay más tiempo que vida. We have more time than life. And so yes, Cesar's mother has passed away. Saturday would be Cesar Chavez's 85th birthday. But here we are today at the White House with these 10 champions of change. And you just heard Melinda speak about how it is so important that we are in this for the long haul. And so with that, let me turn it over. We'll have a quick answer for, we have a little time? One more question. We'll see how, so so from Jonathan Kirsch, just to make sure that we're watching, all of you who are watching online, we're collecting all those questions. They're going to come into all of us, and we're going to be able to answer at least some of them. So this is from Jonathan Kirsch, and he asks the panel, how do you inspire young people to want to give to others in need, to instill that passion for helping others? Not through simple charity or donating canned food to a shelter only, but truly doing the work that helps change lives for the better. Who wants to go? Eve.
Because I work with young people, and the way that we inspire them is by telling them what's happening in Arizona and some of our laws. We have a lot of young people in Arizona that are committing suicide, that are dreamers. In my church, there was a young man that was deported, and his sister was so hurt by the fact that that was her only family, that she literally, at 16 years old, took her life. So when I tell stories to young people and say, young people in our state are dying because we need changes in our policy, we need you to get involved. So we tell the stories that become real to young people and how it's affecting life. A young person should not have to take their life because there's no hope or they don't feel anybody's listening to them. But I say you can be that voice for your neighbor, you can be that voice for the other young person. So I encourage them to come and be that voice and speak together. And I do support the DREAM Act. We need to make a way for them to stay and to work, and there are great contributors to our community.
Thank you very much, Eve.
Well, you know, Eve is very passionate, almost as much as I am when it comes to that. And I think education, a lot of us think about education in the terms of testing, and what does standardized testing tell you? Well, at Escuela Tlatelolco, that's not what we're concerned about. Good human beings that learn about the humanity and keeping their humanity, learn about their history that they hadn't learned about. And when they get engaged in that and know where they come from, then we also, at Escuela Tlatelolco, we have as part of the curriculum, our social justice curriculum, which requires them to be involved in the community. They don't graduate unless they are involved in the community. They have to also identify those issues, and then we say, okay, what do you want to do about it? Well, I don't know, miss. Well, yes, you do. You do know. Are you angry enough about it? Well, yes, I am, miss. Well, then if you're angry enough about it, let's take that, learn the strategies and skills that you need to organize, and let's organize around making change. And that you can. We have to have young people believe absolutely they have the power to make the change. But I'm going to have this caveat. I'm going to tell you, culturally, we make change as family and community. Our young people are not divorced from us. And so when young people want to make change, we ask them to get started with their family. We bring whole families into rallies, into meetings, into marches, because that's how we made change in the 60s and 70s. You know, things didn't happen in this country, or I can, because we had the greatest cabinet secretary of interior, remember? Or we had the President Obama. Things happen and change in this country because people come together. It's called people power, marching. Women got the right to vote because they marched. We came out of Vietnam because this country marched. There was a civil rights movement, incredible civil rights movement that helped all communities of color believe that they could have one person, one vote, and have that opportunity to make change. So young people get engaged when it is personal to them, and when they are upset, it's our responsibility as familia, as adults in their life, to help move them into action.
All right, Nita Gonzalez. So the inspiration of young people, Rose?
Yes, I'd like to put them to work. I think that kids are out there floundering, many of them not a lot to do. Our parents are too busy with two families, the mother and the father are working, and the kids don't have anything to do. And many times people are very poor, and so they don't have any opportunities to go to college. So I really believe that this jobs bill and something in a project rebuild to put kids into construction and community service, service learning, even college students that can connect with community organizations to put on projects, and so they can work, be able to learn the value of their work and their time. And also the mentors. I think many of us are still around here that are willing to continue to mentor them. So I really encourage you to promote that while you're there in these years.
Thank you, Rose. Let me ask Melinda and Nancy this question, and that is, so we all have been around the issue of education, and we talk about it as a keystone to our future. And we know 54 million Latinos now in the United States of America, and the importance of us making sure that our young people are educated, graduating, not dropping out. We've been dealing with these issues for all of our lives up here. So let me ask Melinda and Nancy to respond. How best can we do that through looking at people like Cesar, Dolores Huerta, so many others? And how can we inspire them to make sure that they stay on an educational pursuit?
Sure. Well, just like I said before, at the school that I'm at KIPP, there's no ifs. I mean, the kids know that once they enter the school, it's to start, to finish, to go to college, to finish it, and to give to the community. I mean, but it's just also being on top of them. And just as educators, just like Nita said, not to teach to the test. We don't do that. You have to teach them about their culture and let them know that they can do this. It's doable. We're not asking you to, like I tell them in my classroom, and they're watching, I'm not asking you to build a rocket so we can go to the moon, but if you do, that's awesome. But I'm asking you something that you can do it. It's doable. You can go to college, finish, and give to the community. But just like you were saying, when, like, sometimes my students, when they go to Miss Cubano's room, you know, like Christopher Columbus' story doesn't sound the same in Miss Cubano's room. Because for some reason, Miss Cubano comes up with letters that he gave to the queen, and the kids come out of my room like, really? And we have a day? You know, so it makes them think. It makes them think, and that's what I'm there for, to put that seed and to tell them, like, it's not just, educate. It's not just what you, don't just take it for granted because it's in that book. Sometimes I have to, like, plant that seed and let them know, like, there's more to it.
So Nancy, let me ask you this, a follow-up question, dig a little deeper here. So the kids who are at KIPP and who have Miss Cubano as their teacher are very fortunate because we know they are going to be very successful. For all of those Latinos who are not in Miss Cubano's classroom, how can we get them into the position of the students who are in your classroom so that they have the same, si se puede, no is not an option, you're going to get it done? How do we get to that other universe of young
Just like
Latinos?
you've heard from all, you know, the panel basically said it, it's like advocate for yourself. Don't just sit there and do nothing. You have to move. And, you know, like a lot of my students, they see me, they're like, you're going to go to the White House? And I'm like, yes, and you will see me there. I never thought I will be there.
You want to
Never.
wave to them?
Hello, hi, KIPP. Miss Cubano's here. So I told them, si se puede, I'm here. I never thought I could do it. And like yesterday, one of my students, Kiara, she was like, Miss Guerra, I'm so proud of you. But that makes me feel like you did it. I can do it. I mean, why not? And I'm like, there you go. My job is done. You can go. So she now realizes that because Ms. Cubano did it, she can do it. But she has to advocate for herself. She can't just, because Ms. Cubano's helping me, it's going to happen. She has to do it by herself, too.
Okay, Melinda, let me have you have a crack at that, and I'm getting some signals over here. Oh, no, well, let me ask Melinda to respond to that, and then we'll take one from the audience. So go ahead, Melinda.
Yeah, one thing I was thinking is I don't think there's anything wrong with the young people. I think it's there's systems, there's barriers, there's obstacles that we put in place for them. So I think, as if you're in a place of a teacher, of a mentor, we've got to break down some of those barriers because young people want to be involved. And what I've found is when folks are engaged in their community, they do better in school. So if they're only going to school and they're not connecting with the larger community and they're isolated from that and they're isolated from community engagement and activism, they do worse in school. So we've got to engage them in the community. This week is National Farm Worker Awareness Week. As a part of every week when Cesar Chavez's birthday is, we have a week of celebration. There are thousands of young people all over the country that are celebrating this week today, tomorrow, raising awareness in their communities, doing blood drives. This is in collaboration with the United Farm Workers and Student Action with Farm Workers and a lot of other partners that provide opportunities. It's peer-to-peer, young people talking to other young people about how to get involved. So some of it is just having young people share with each other, be peer mentors, peer support for each other to get involved with their community. So I think some of it is, there isn't really, young people are doing fine, they just need opportunities. And one thing we always hear from young people is that they want connection to seasoned advocates. They want relationships with folks who've been doing the work. So one of the simple things we do is try to just make those connections. Have young people have lunch with a young person, talk to them about what you're doing, having them shadow you for a day, taking them on outreach. They really are longing for Cesar Chavez's. They're really looking for people in their community who will have the courage to speak out against injustice. They want to see that, and they want to have relationships with people who are willing to do that.
Thank you, Melinda. All right. Well, I have a bunch of more questions, but I think it would be best if I called some people from the audience here. So let's go to the young woman in the back, and then we'll come to the young woman also over here in the white, and we'll take both of those questions, and then we may actually take that young man's question over there, and then we'll just have an right? Make sure you keep those in your heads, and we'll have you respond to that way. We'll have a little bit of audience interaction. Go ahead, tell us your name.
Hi, my name is Indra Gomez, and I am a young Latina. First of all, I would like to thank all of the champions and the moderators and the Cesar Chavez family for allowing me to be here, and also congratulations for being great role models, great examples for young Latinos like myself. I am currently a politics major at the Catholic University of America here in Washington, D.C., and I hope to be on the side of the policymaking someday. It's not an if, I will do it. I guess my question is that as a young Latina, I have always struggled with the sense of identity and the sense of, I was born in the United States, yes, but I come from a Latino family. So am I Mexican? Am I American? What is American? So I guess my question for the panel in general is, how did you face that challenge of identity, and how do you think that is affecting the young people that you are mentoring today, and how do you help them deal with that?
I think she's going to be president, huh? Give Andy a round of applause. That's a great question. Let me quickly take we're going to take a couple more questions so we can get some other people involved. The young woman in the white, in the red beads.
My name is Laura Casas Fryer. I come from the Silicon Valley. Born in Mexico, immigrated very young, a United States citizen, and feel very, very American. Last week, I was in the Silicon Valley in a panel discussion on immigration, and there were some very conservative people, there were some Tea Partiers, and they just came up to me and just said, well, you know, we're in fear. We're in fear that you're taking over the country and we're losing our freedoms. And I just, for that moment, I thought, wow, they really are afraid. How do we deal with the fear of trying to be a part of America, but then there's that resistance that.
Okay. Let me thank you, Laura, and I had promised you I would take this question, and then we have so let's quickly take this question, and then I want you all, we're going to have another opportunity here in just a minute. So let's just take this last question.
Hi there. My name is King Chan, and I'm from Long Beach, California. And I wanted to thank you all. You're all very inspiring. I also have to give a shout out to Cesar Chavez for inviting me in the first place, so thank you very much. This truly means the world to me. I'm a former high school dropout, and so not many people would know that narrative until I tell it to them. And my question is, due to the political climate as it is today, do you believe a watered down or a so-called watered down version of the DREAM Act is acceptable, or should we push forward with a fully inclusive DREAM Act from the 111th Congress?
Okay. All right. We are going to take those questions under advisement, but we have a special guest that we get to introduce here. So let me, first of all, ask you to give the panel a round of applause. They were marvelous. Your questions are very good, both online and here in the audience. And I also want to take this moment as I introduce Valerie Jarrett, who is the President's senior advisor and who is in so many ways the architect of his campaign and is a heart and soul, really, of so much of what we do here. And I see that heart and soul in so many different ways, and her standing up for an inclusive America, no exceptions. And what she does is being the chairperson of the President's Council on Women and Girls. And every day she's fighting for all of us. But I also see it in the names of the people that the President and Valerie oversee and the people that they work with here in this House, including people like Cecilia Munoz, the first chair of the Domestic Policy Council ever in the White House, who's Latina, appointed by the President to serve in that position. And I see it in Julie Rodriguez from the White House who organized this event, and I see it in Stephanie Valencia and Felicia Escobar and Luis Miranda and so many other people, because this president is about having an inclusive America, and that means an inclusive White House. And one of the people who makes all of that happen every single day is my friend, the President's senior advisor, Valerie Jarrett.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. We are just delighted to have you all here. Thank you, Secretary Salazar, although I really do get to call him Ken since I've known him since our first year of law school. So we go way back, and I could tell you all stories, but I won't do that right now. I also want to thank our terrific panel and to congratulate all of our champions. We all are here standing on the shoulders of others, and we just are so proud of each and every one of you, and the legacy of this very important champion for change is near and dear to all of our hearts. And so I have the privilege of introducing to you not only the President of the United States, but someone who is at his heart a community organizer. Please join me in welcoming President Barack Obama.
Hello, how are you? Have a seat, have a seat. Si se puede. Thank you so much, everybody. Everybody, please have a seat. Thank you so much for joining us, both here in the White House and online, to celebrate one of our nation's great civil rights leaders, Cesar Chavez. We are especially grateful to have some of his family members with us here today. And as we celebrate Cesar's 85th birthday, we're reminded that only in America could his story be possible. Only in America could a migrant farm worker rise to be a leader not just of his community, but a leader of his entire country. Of course, he didn't do it alone. He drew inspiration from figures like Gandhi and Dr. King and other visionary leaders who helped him develop his principles for nonviolence. More significantly, he was supported by extraordinary people at the grassroots level. People who looked ordinary, but were actually extraordinary because of their courage and their commitment and their dedication. Many of you in this audience and thousands of people across the country marched alongside him and supported La Causa to ensure the dignity and respect of people who put food on our tables. Earlier this week, the Secretary Hilda Solis inducted the pioneers of the farm workers movement into the Department of Labor's Hall of Honor. And last year, Ken Salazar, where Ken went over there, designated the 40 acres site in Delano, California as a National Historic Landmark, forever commemorating the birthplace of the United Farm Workers. So we continue to honor Cesar's legacy. Today we honor 10 leaders who are building on that legacy, from providing legal services to farm workers and immigrants to educating and empowering Latino youth. They're continuing his work in communities throughout the country. And ultimately, that's how change happens, through men and women making the choice to be part of something larger than themselves. I want to read a quote from Cesar. He said, "We cannot seek achievement for ourselves and forget about progress and prosperity for our community. Our ambitions must be broad enough to include the aspirations and needs of others, for their sakes and for our own." I think those are good words to live by. And we are extraordinarily proud of him, but more importantly, we recognize through days like today that his spirit continues to ripple and move our nation towards greater justice. So thank you so much. Happy Cesar Chavez Day.